Hello, welcome to Cavello Connect. My name is Phil Guerin. I am a technical account manager here with Cavello. We're going to be looking at the intersect of data, classification, and vulnerabilities, something that Cavello refers to as vulnerability management 2.0. So, vulnerability management, right? Why are we talking about data? I've got scanners. I can run vulnerability analysis across all of my hosts. I get really nice severity CVSS scores so I can know where to prioritize and spend my time. And that was great 10 years ago, 20 years ago even, right? Today, data is the center of the story. And the reason I say this, right, most organizations out there have a strong to semi-strong backup and recovery program in place, right? So if a server gets compromised, I go to my backup, I replay from that. I'm back up within the day, I'm back up within the afternoon. The only real impact to me is what's the cost of my operational downtime. And now if you're wargaming out that backup and restore process, you have a solid understanding of this and you can tighten those up wherever necessary. The problem is when data gets compromised in those events, that's the long pole conversation. Right? How long is that going to present a financial impact to my organization? 6 months, 8 months, 18 months? And what's the magnitude of that financial impact going to be? I need to understand my data in order to qualify what the risk really is. Right? Now, this used to be simple, right? Jump in my Wayback Machine with me. Let's go back like even 10 years. It was simple. All of our data was on the server. It ran in a special room. It was within the building. Everyone could go put their hands on it. Maybe only 2 or 3 people had like the special key to be able to get in there in the first place. And life was simple, right? Well understood data sets, all in a very well controlled place. It wasn't something that we thought about in terms of managing the data, right? We just patched vulnerabilities. We laid out good config. We installed antivirus. We deployed firewalls and everything was great. Fast forward to today. Right? Everything generates data and a lot of it. We all generate and consume orders of magnitude more data every year than we did in the previous. And we're not talking about the server anymore. We're talking about a myriad of different cloud services. We're talking about on-prem systems, virtualization, co-located systems, partner managed systems, all kinds of laptops and desktops under usage. Right? The laptops today are supercomputers compared to the laptops 10, 20 years ago. In terms of the software on these laptops compared to today versus 10, 20 years ago, just the data generation alone is unwieldy. And we can be working from anywhere, right? We can't rely on being on site. We can't rely on being within the bounds of our firewalls. We can't even really rely on our employees being consistently on a VPN connection to be able to gain the coverage of network visibility. Again, right? Like we're distributed, not only from the data perspective, but the system perspective. And those two senses of distribution create quite a big problem. So vulnerabilities, right? How do we used to look at it? Like I say, run our scans, scan the network, find everything sitting on it, run a vulnerability analysis against it, look at our 10s, our 9s, and our 8s, and then prioritize downwards. Again, we used to be able to do this with a limited set of devices. We have way too many different things running now. We can't just patch everything from the 10s and the 9s and the 8s downward. We're never going to patch everything, right? So a new focus is focusing on known exploitable vulnerabilities. So what do I mean by this, right? I'm sure many of you are going to get caught up in a similar conversation. It's like, look, I've got a bunch of 10s and 9s on a server here. I've got some 5s and 6s over here. And I got a member of my team telling me they've spent the last 2 weeks focusing on wrestling down those 5s and 6s. Well, why are we focusing on 5s and 6s instead of these 9s and 10s, right? Like we have a misprioritization going on. Well, maybe, maybe not, right? What if you had the data to demonstrate that those 9s and 10s have never been exploited in their lifetimes? And those 5s and 6s have been exploited 67 times over the last 3 weeks. Now risk enters the conversation, right? We're not just talking about CVSS scores and potential severity. We're talking about real world risk impact. If these 5s and 6s are being regularly exploited, I need to go patch those. If those 9s and 10s have never been exploited, that goes to the bottom of my list. all things considered, right? That's not a real risk that just has a high severity to it. And this is a real challenge in terms of being blinded, in terms of seeing the forest for the trees. Now, even that's not enough, unfortunately, right? We're going to have a certain amount of these known exploitable vulnerabilities spread across our environments. We're not going to be able to go patch all of those as well. Even if we were able to rise to that challenge, where do we focus within that already focused set? This is where the data comes in. Just to add a little bit of weight to that, right? You can't just focus on all your vulnerabilities. You can't patch everything. It's frankly not possible. You need to focus down on the real risk assessment in terms of what's actually exploitable versus what's not, and focus there. That is going to be still a very large set of work, and you need to focus, right? Now compare that to what we're looking at, the more traditional vulnerability landscape, right? Focus on the top and work our way down. On any given quarter, we might start scratching into that second layer at best, right? And if most of our sensitive data and most of our critical systems are sitting down on those lower tranches and we're not looking at them because we don't have the data to justify it, we're actually not doing the work to keep our organization safe. It's a new story. It's a new set of complexities, but the reality is we have to look at all of this together, right? Ignore the noise. Forget about 80% of your vulnerabilities, which may be a shocking point to hear, but the reality is 80% of them don't matter, right? Which of that 20% does matter? Those are your known exploitable vulnerabilities. And now within that, where do I focus? Where is my data, right? How sensitive is my data? Who has access to my data? Who's actually been working with my data? And where do I have sensitive data sitting exposed by known exploitable vulnerabilities where it's not supposed to be? Right? I want to hammer on that point, because when I have data sitting offside or where it's not supposed to be, my security team is not geared in to protect that. It can't see it. It doesn't expect it to be there in the first place. And just like everything is generating data, there are so many ways to move data as a human being, not to mention all the automated processes that are syncing things between cloud services and devices and all of these services that are helping you stay organized. It's copying your data, it's moving your data around, and if you're not staying on top of the access and who's actually using it, this is the real story at the end of the day, right? Like, I like to take a big step back and use the analogy. Even if I do what I'm saying is impossible, I patch every single vulnerability every single day on every single asset, someone's going to click on a phishing link. And now I need to understand where my data is and who has access to it in order to protect the organization from what the biggest impact from a cost perspective is going to be. And that's people using my data against me. So if I have multiple instances where I have sensitive data that is exposed, which is almost certain to be in your environment, those out of band or out of side data points are exposed by known exploitable vulnerabilities, and it's going to be more than one or two cases, which is, again, almost certain in the environment. What else do I need to know, right? That's back to your access model. If I'm falling behind on my patch management, if I'm falling behind on configuration, if I don't understand how many people have access to a particular document in the first place, I need to start there, right? From a simple training perspective. Right? If I have a sensitive document and 100 people have access to it, only 3 people reasonably need to be using it. Why am I spending all of my time training those other 97? Right? Why am I putting all these other protections in place and monitoring this and reviewing this and spending my very expensive opportunity cost by over-focusing when I can look at the data, I can shrink that access model down to what's appropriate, and then now shift to other focuses, right? The traditional focuses. Am I staying caught up on patch management? And again, not everything. Am I focused on the patches that matter? Now, the powerful thing here, I make a joke, right? Like, enough is a bit of a 4-letter word in the security space, but enough is the target, right? Now, we need to have the data to be able to demonstrate when enough is enough in order to satisfy our customers, our stakeholders, the people we work with, and the people we work for. And if we have that data and we can show we have done more than reasonable efforts to protect our systems and protect our data, we get our opportunity cost back, right? We can now go focus on revenue driving operations of the business and not just patch all day, every day, indiscriminately. Now, fortunately, Cavello, as a platform, an attack surface management focused platform, does exactly this. We discover all of your data. We classify all the sensitivity. We give you a means to track when that data is offside, who has access to it, who's been working with it. And again, that special sauce coming back in here, right? Where is it exposed outside of the access model by known exploitable vulnerabilities? So on your day-to-day, your week-to-week, you have the best lens and the best set of data to define when and where enough is enough. And the powerful thing behind all of this is you have an ongoing full measurement of your entire environment to facilitate any kind of compliance, insurance, or regulatory audit that you may have to go through. As you're scaling as a business, your customers are going to start asking more and more questions in terms of the diligence you're showing to your systems, to your data, and more importantly, to their data when they're transacting and working with you. And this is a rising story as well. So those DDQs are becoming just as important for a lot of firms as their cybersecurity renewal or their regulation audits. So with Cavello as a platform, not only cover all your audit basis, but do it in an operationally focused way where you have the insights to protect your firm, protect your data, protect your systems, and again, focus on where enough is enough. Okay, so let's dive into the Cavello platform and let's get a look at how Cavello can help you reach all of these goals. Okay, welcome to Cavello's platform. Right? This brings together data classification, vulnerability analysis, and software deployments to help you focus on the context you need to understand to make a real risk assessment. Let's get away from worrying about severity. Let's focus on risk and impact. Right? So this heat map should be familiar from what we were just talking about. Right? The whole significance here is bringing together multiple points of context, not just CVSS scores, to focus on where I want to keep my data and my systems protected. All right, so remember, this is all about a lens of where to stay prioritized in terms of vulnerability management by leveraging your data insights, who has access to it, understanding what else is deployed across these assets, and again, using all of that to understand what the impact, understand what the financial impact to an organization is going to be, as opposed to the CVSS academic severity. So how does Cavello help you do this? Fortunately, we've gone to lengths to make this very easy. And when I say very easy, I'm going to argue that this is the simplest deployment model on the market for any of the functionality that I just mentioned, much less being able to bring it all together into one place. So there is no infrastructure, there is nothing on-prem that you need to deploy, stand up, and manage. There is no ongoing operational or administrative costs here, right? You deploy a self-managing agent to all of your laptops, desktops, virtual machines, and file servers, and they manage themselves from there, right? They're going to pull their own updates. They're going to do that safely and securely. And then using our cloud dashboard here, you can also connect to your various cloud services to tackle that hybrid environment. Right? I've got data sitting in multiple cloud services. I have servers located in all kinds of different locations on all kinds of different mediums. And who knows where all of my laptops are sitting today. You've got a direct API connection to the services. You've got an on-host agent running on all those assets. And you just removed network complexity completely from being able to get insights. So we bring, as a platform, Cavello generates and maintains a continuous data inventory. So show me everything, right? How much email do I have? How much SharePoint data do I have? Who's storing what across my OneDrive accounts? Who's pulling down copies of things to their laptops and desktops from my various file servers? And what is that data from a sensitivity perspective, right? Where do I have my PII, PCI, and PHI data? All driven by the NIST data privacy standards. So think credit card numbers, social insurance and social security numbers, passport numbers, phone numbers, email addresses. The list goes on. This is all out of the box. Now, we also help you focus on any references to special keywords that you may need to track down, right? Show me all references to special project X. Who's talking about that over their email? Who's storing what in their SharePoint drives? Where is that data and the artifacts distributed across my landscape? How sensitive is it? And where is it supposed to be and where is it not supposed to be? We're doing this all on a continuous basis, so you have the data here at the ready, all under a single pane of glass when you need it. And then moving into what I refer to as the query engine, you can inspect and ask questions to this data. So let's take a look at where all the credit card information is today across this environment. I ask my question and I get my answer. Right? So I can see the MacBooks and the laptops and the various cloud services where I have my credit card data. Right? I can see this sitting in people's OneDrives. I can see this sitting in various SharePoint directories. Right? This is supposed to be in some places and it's not supposed to be in others. So if I have someone who's responsible for tracking and managing the distribution of this type of financial data, I can ask the question, I can set up a scheduled report for this, and now I can integrate downstream with the ongoing initiatives. Covello has just now automated all the discovery and the insights in terms of where that data is. Now that's going to facilitate your audit. Covello can do you one better. There's going to be times where you need to dive in and take action beyond your weekly or your monthly audit, or maybe more appropriately, your quarterly or your monthly audit. So for example, those of us here at Covello, we're not supposed to be storing credit card information on our laptops. I'm definitely not supposed to be sending credit card information around my email. Those are our policies. When our staff violates these policies, it's not because they're bad people. Security is simply not a front of mind focus for most human beings. Right? We sign the policy waivers in terms of what we're supposed to be doing, but the reality is at the end of the day, we're focused on getting our jobs done. Right? We have deadlines to meet, we have data to share, we have contracts to distribute in order to get things done. And if there's a path of least resistance, someone is going to take it, and it's not going to be malicious, but is going to violate a data control policy, which puts the organization at risk. So lean into the reality. It's going to happen. Set up your policies. And when it happens, your team gets notified. You can reach out to the individuals, have that focused training conversation, reconcile the data right then and there, and now you're engaging in regular data hygiene, just like you're already engaging in regular patch management. Just like we've been saying all along, right? These two things go hand in hand. You can't let your patch management fall behind. You can't let your data hygiene fall behind. The problem is you can't even get started with data hygiene if you're not measuring your data to start with. Now, once I understand where my data is, especially where my data is offside, well, who has access to it? Right? So across all of your cloud services, across all of your on-prem and your endpoint deployments, who has access to the data that Covello is discovering and classifying? Once I understand who has access to it, well, is everyone who has access to it actually using the data? What does that audit model look like? So again, across your cloud services, across all of your on-prem and your endpoint deployments, who's actually going into systems and services and servers and downloading files and editing files and taking copies of things? What does the behavior look like within that access model? And again, we need to understand that in general from an audit perspective. From a security perspective, we need to understand how that aligns with data that's offside or unexpected, and especially data that is not well protected today. Now, the access model and the underlying audit is not your only risk to your data, right? That's the modern focus, like we've been talking about this entire time. It doesn't mean I can turn a blind eye to vulnerabilities. Right? It doesn't mean I can turn a blind eye to configuration analysis. I have to harden those endpoints as best as I can. Covello helps you with this. We use the CIS benchmark controls as the lens. Basic stuff, right? Where do I have the opportunity to roll out things like password complexity rules and account lockout rules? Let's make it easier for the human beings to make less mistake with the systems, less mistakes with the data. Now, when it comes to vulnerabilities, this is going to be a story that most people listening to this are going to be really well versed in, right? I need to patch vulnerabilities. To get started, I need to scan from every perspective possible. So Covello as a platform will facilitate external vulnerability scans, internal subnet-based vulnerability scans. Let's go find everything on your network, including all your peripherals. And again, the real power here comes with that endpoint agent. Let's get local on all the devices that matter and scan for vulnerabilities right on the host and remove any network complexity from that equation. Let's guarantee good and consistent results. Now, you want to scan for everything to maintain your overall audit. You still need to understand the CVSS scores involved because you're beholden to that, right? It's a legacy way of thinking, but your insurance companies and your customers and many of your colleagues and superiors are going to expect you to have a handle on those CVSS scores. Now, like we said, right, beyond just the CVSS scores, you need to understand which vulnerabilities are actually exploited and which ones aren't. That's your day-to-day priority focus. That's where you're spending your time. That's where you're driving to that point of enough. Even that set is going to be larger than you can tackle on a regular basis. So beyond that, again, this is where Covello comes back in to help. Don't just patch everything. Focus on where your data is exposed. Right? And just like I want to understand my outliers and my concentration of where my known exploitable vulnerabilities are, where is the most of it? Where are my biggest risk points? You need to understand the data types that stand out in your environment the most. This is what's presenting the impact, right? If a system gets breached, beyond the obvious, who cares, right? Run your backup and restore, get back up and running, communicate your IR process out as you need to, and get back to business, right? But if you don't understand the data, that conversation is not done. That conversation just gets started because now you have to understand what the impact of that data loss is going to present to the firm days, weeks, months, and years moving forward. You need to measure it proactively, engage in that regular data hygiene, because it's not an if, it's a when, right? These systems, these services are going to get breached. It might be someone clicking on a link. It might be someone just opening the door wide for somebody inadvertently, and that data is going to walk out of your environment. So you need to understand what you have, and you need to understand what the impact of that is going to be to your organization when it gets breached. And then you need to do the work, just like you're focusing on patch management. You need to protect that data. So, bring it all back together. Our point here is Covello simply offers better tooling because we bring vulnerability management focused on known exploitable vulnerabilities together with your data classification and your access models. Now, because we have all this information together, we can do something powerful with it as well. We can trend it. So you've got two important KPIs that are the most fundamental in your business today as it relates to data privacy and data protection. What is the data liability currently in my environment? And that changes every day because my data changes every day. And what's the risk of exposure to that data? And that's changing on a regular basis because my assets are constantly being changed and my employees are constantly being changed and the things that they're downloading and doing with those assets are constantly changing. And the security communities at large are not only finding new vulnerabilities on new assets and new deployments, they're finding new vulnerabilities on old software and old deployments alike. These are just constantly moving targets. Now, if you trend this together, this is how Covello helps you manage the risk conversation, right? I can take the actions of my team over the last 3 months and say, based on what we've done, here's the measurable reduction to our firm's data liability and the risk of exposure to it. Is enough enough? You can make that determination. If it's not, this is what I'm going to do over the next 2 months. Here are the data points and the outliers in terms of why I'm spending this very valuable time on these actions. And here's where I project the continued decrease in our data liability and the risk of exposure to it. And once we hit that plateau, that is enough. Why is it enough? Well, because if we start deleting more data and getting rid of more systems, we can't actually run the business forward. And we can demonstrate with data and with measurements that even if our most sensitive system gets breached from a data perspective, we are well within tolerance of what our customers expect from us. We are well within tolerance of what our legal team expects from us. And we are well within tolerance of what our insurance company expects from us. So you're still going to have to go through a bit of a bad day or a bad week in terms of getting systems back online, communicating with your customers, communicating with legal, running through your IR process. But you're doing that not only with the best data available, but the justification and the evidence that you've been using the best data available and you've been engaging on the best data available to keep your organization as well protected under that lens of where enough is enough. So that's my 20,000 foot view of the Covello platform. I'm going to switch back to this one screen here because I think it's a nice overview in terms of some of the operational focus that we bring together. Right? It's not just about the data. It's not just about the vulnerabilities. It's not just about the software deployments. It's not just about the access models. It's about all of it. And organization by organization, time over time, it's all different. Right? So we need to measure that impact on a regular basis and do the work. Thank you for spending some time with me today, talking about data classification and vulnerability management. If you've spent the time to go through this with me today, if you have any interesting questions, this is obviously something of growing importance to you, something I'm pretty biased and obviously important to me as well. I'd like to encourage you all, please check out covello.com. We have a growing amount of resources to be able to better educate you on this domain, where you sit within your own cybersecurity maturity journey, and where we can help. Right? Please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. Please reach out to the team directly as well. Right? I'm surrounded by a growing number of individuals that are very passionate about this space and would love to have a conversation, help you find a solution that is going to meet your needs.